The human body can do many things without any external influence, like running, eating, talking, or even dying. But can it just start a fire by itself and burn itself to ashes without affecting anything in its surroundings? In 1963, a woman in Paris named Nicole Millet was sleeping in her bed when she suddenly burst into flames. Her husband, who was sleeping in another room, woke up to the smell of smoke and ran to her rescue. But it was too late. He found her body completely burned to ashes, except for her skull and a few bones. Her bed and the straw mattress were untouched by the fire. No one was in the house with them, so the husband had no idea what had happened to his wife. Shocked and terrified, he called the police, who quickly arrested him for murder. He claimed he had no idea what had happened and that he was innocent. But no one believed him, so he was sentenced to death. But before he could actually be executed, a Danish physician, Thomas Bartholin, who had heard of his case, wrote a letter to the court. Dr. Bartholin claimed that he had an explanation and that what happened to Nicole Millet was not murder but a natural phenomenon called spontaneous human combustion. It is a rare but possible phenomenon where a human body can catch fire without any external source of ignition. Historical cases, like Mary Reeser's in 1951, provide a timeline of unexplained human fires. It can be caused by alcoholism, static electricity, and the Wick effect. More on that later. Although the courts were not entirely sure, they spared the life of Nicole's husband and declared his wife's death as an act of God. Fast forward to 1951 in St. Petersburg, Florida. Mary Reeser, seated in her chair, supposedly caught fire spontaneously. Her neighbor, who saw her sitting in her usual spot, came to visit her the next morning. They knocked on her door, but there was no answer. He tried to open the door, but the knob was too hot. He called the landlord, who came with a screwdriver and opened the door. They were greeted by a horrifying sight. They found Reeser's body burned to ashes, except for her left foot, which was still wearing a slipper, and her backbone. Her chair was also burned, but the rest of the room was intact. The temperature in the room was normal, and there was no trace of smoke or soot. The strange nature of the scene left the police and forensic expert, Wilton Krogman, baffled. Wilton examined the scene closely and said he had never seen anything like it in his 35 years of experience. The fire was too intense and too selective to be caused by a cigarette. He estimated that the fire had reached temperatures of up to 1,000 degrees Celsius, enough to reduce a body to ashes. But he had no explanation as to what or how the fire started or how it stopped. So the conclusion is that this may be just another case of spontaneous human combustion. But are these cases really the phenomena of spontaneous human combustion, or was it something else? How could a human body act like an inside-out candle, where the clothing or hair provided the wick and the body fat provided the fuel? How could a fire be so powerful and so precise that it did not damage the surroundings? These questions remained unanswered, and the mystery of spontaneous human combustion deepened. In 1984, a science investigator named Joe Nickel and a forensic analyst named John F. Fisher conducted a 2-year research project involving 30 historical cases of alleged spontaneous human combustion from 1725 to 1982. They published their results in the Journal of the International Association of Arson Investigators, as well as part of a book. Surprisingly, despite the growing evidence of this phenomenon, they found no credible evidence for it. Except in cases where crucial data was lacking, they determined that plausible naturalistic explanations could easily be provided. They showed that most of the cases involved external sources of ignition, such as candles, lamps, or cigarettes, that were overlooked or ignored by the witnesses or the investigators. They also showed that the Wick effect was a valid explanation for most of the cases, and that it could account for the high temperatures, the localized damage, and the greasy residue. More recently, in 2019, a team of researchers from the University of Queensland conducted a series of experiments to test the possibility of spontaneous human combustion. They used pig carcasses, which have a similar composition to human bodies, and exposed them to various conditions, such as high temperatures, electric shocks, and flammable liquids. They found that none of the carcasses ignited spontaneously, and that they all required an external source of ignition, such as a flame or a spark. They also found that the Wick effect was a valid explanation for most of the historical cases of spontaneous human combustion, and that the fire could reach temperatures of up to 1,000 degrees Celsius, enough to reduce a body to ashes. The Wick effect is a hypothesis that suggests that a human body can act like an inside-out candle, where the clothing or hair of the victim provides the wick, and the body fat provides the fuel. This can result in a slow and low-temperature combustion that can consume much of the body, leaving behind the extremities and a residue of ash and grease. The Wick effect can be triggered by a small external flame source, such as a cigarette, and it can create a fire that is so hot and so localized that it does not spread to the surroundings or leave any trace of smoke or soot. The Wick effect has been observed in experiments and investigations, and it can explain most of the historical cases of alleged spontaneous human combustion. While there is still no consensus as to what causes spontaneous human combustion, it appears to be a paranormal hoax that became a literary legend. Let me know if you have an alternative explanation for this strange phenomenon. If you enjoyed today's story, please share the video and subscribe to my channel. I research, write the scripts, and edit the videos all by myself, so your support will go a long way. Thanks for watching.